Good afternoon. How's everyone? Welcome to this edition of the Prodigio show, which is going to be talking about pairs trading. Prodigio Chat Hour live on TOS. My name is Peter Reznicek, Chief Strategist for ShadowTrader.net. How's the sound out there? Is everybody cool with the sound? You should have visuals, and you should see web browser up with this weekend's weekend update. That's where we're going to start, because the starting point for this whole thing is the fact that this gentleman, Bob D, was able to use Prodigio over the last month, pull $241 out of 10,000 unmargined in pairs. And so I figured we'd just go back to the basics and show you how he did it and how easy it is to bring these strategies onto your desktop, import them into Prodigio, real simple, right? And and go from there. Because if you can put Prodigio together basically with the Shadow Trader advisory for the pairs, then you've got 90% of the work done. Already Prodigio is doing a lot of the work for you, but here, if we can bring in all of the whiz files directly from the newsletter, then you have very, very little to do. All right, so we're good. Good sound and visuals. Bob D, congratulations once again. The gentleman who just typed, that's Bob D, who was the pairs winner. So Bob D, feel free to chime in at any time if I missed something or you want to flesh out something extra, because we're going to be talking about your trades, etc., on the show. All right, so starting with the weekend update from this Sunday. If you guys don't have it, remember, just go to shadowtrader.net, put your email address in the box on the lower left-hand corner of the screen there to receive the weekend update each weekend. And once you do, you'll be receiving this report on Sundays that you see in front of you. And what I've done is I've just scrolled down to one of the middle sections here, and I'm going to keep the scrolling to a minimum, because that's just screws up the visuals a little bit. It pushes a little bit too much bandwidth. But inside of this weekend update, you will notice that there's a part in the middle called Pairs Trading Corner, where we give a recap of what went on in the world of pairs over the past week. Possibly some Wizard Lab strategies are put there. This week it's definitely talking about Bob's wins. So what I did is I decided to just leave up this part here that has Bob's entries and exits. So what I want you guys to take a look at is all this stuff here in the middle of the screen, showing that in one pair he traded 4 times, right, over the course of the month. So basically what we did is we required everybody to only trade one pair as many times as they could, right? They could do whatever they wanted strategy-wise inside of the pair. However, they could only trade that pair and no other pairs, right, as many times as they wanted. That means that if they wanted to have a strategy that was playing for 5-cent retracements off the mean constantly back and forth, so be it, whatever they wanted to do. So you can see here that Bob traded 4 times from November 7th all the way to November 30th. Gains of 103, 21, 12, and then a big gain of 105 on the last trade, all right? And all of this was automated, all right? So before we get into how he did it in terms of the automation, let's just go for 1 second. I'm going to switch to a TOS platform, and we'll just familiarize ourselves from the ground up of what exactly is going on in the pair and why exactly we'd want to do this, right? So basically what we have on the chart in front of us is a special pairs trading chart, which we've set up here. This is easy to do. The Pairs Trader newsletter PDF that is the user's guide will teach you all about this. That's really easy to do. Basically, you're looking at a spread between the two stocks. We have Prudential minus MetLife. These are 2 insurers, right? You can see that the spread is relatively tight. It has small areas on the chart where there is somewhat of an upward bias, then sometimes downward bias, but overall, you've got a relatively safe trade here, because it's going to be very, very difficult for the value of the spread to explode in any direction, right? Because obviously it's one minus the other. So currently you can see that the value of PruMet, meaning Prudential minus Met, is $18.41, right? And if we go back to our weekend update, correct, you can see the values where Bob was oscillating around that area, right? Notice that in the first trade he bought the spread at 18.19, and then he sold the spread at 19.31. And mind you, like I've been saying, strictly automated, right? He's got his Prodigio set to buy the pair at that lower level and sell the pair at that higher level. Excuse me. Second trade, he's short at 21.22, holding it down to 21.09. Then again, he's short at 21.36, holding on to the pair at 21.33. And then again, he's long at 17.86 and long and out at 18.90. And I find this very interesting because you notice that of the 4 trades he did, right, he did one long, one short, and another long. So 2 and 2, which is pretty impressive. So this goes to show you that the reason I'm mentioning this specifically is because I don't want people to think that this gentleman threw on an automated strategy and he got lucky and that he pulled a Hail Mary and that he just set it and said, oh, I'll just buy here and get out at the end of the contest. That would have been easy, and to be honest with you, he probably would not have even come out ahead because you can see the pair reverted very close to the mean value at 1846. So I find this very, very impressive that a person was able to do 4 winning trades over the course of 1 month, fully automated on a strategy that really has very, very low risk. Right? So just keep that in mind. He did not just pull a Hail Mary, shoot, one trade and say, okay, I think the pair is going to have an upward bias for the month and, get in on November 1st and get out on November 30th. He was banging it back and forth within a range, and again, because he's doing it fully automated, Prodigio is doing all of the work for him. All right, so let's go really slowly, thank you, and figure out how Bob did it. So basically, what we want to do is we want to show from the ground up how we would bring in strategies that we can automate right into our Prodigio. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you guys through bringing in 2 strategies on 2 different pairs from our Pairs Trader newsletter, and then we're going to go back, we're going to go do a third one that we're going to build from the ground up, where we're going to take the nodes that we have in Prodigio and the rule builder, and all we're going to do is we're going to change our symbols and change our targets and stops, etc., and we're going to rebuild our own pair, and then we can set it and we'll see what happens there. Okay, so the first step, obviously, when you're looking for pairs here, is you want to go into your Pairs Trader newsletter, and I'm going to do this as slow as possible here so that we don't have a lot of scrolling action happening. So if you go to mytrade.com, right, you log in there, and you want to go into people, and you see all of these are here. And you'll find the Pairs Trader newsletter right here. And the reason we're going in here is because we're going to actually get the code that we need to enable Prodigio to trade the pairs automated, rather than build them completely from the ground up. We're going to look at the rules, so you're going to see how it's built, but you're not going to have to do any of the work yourself because the work is already done for you here in the newsletter. Okay? So real simple. Let's scroll down to, yeah. So real simple, if I scroll down to that middle section there in the newsletter where the strategies are, you can see that there's whiz files for buying and selling FCX SCCO, ACI JRCC, BXP Vino, and also PGN PNW. And PGN PNW actually already fired today, correct? We know that that's actually an active pair. And just to show you here on my Thinkorswim platform, right? I actually have the pair already running, and you can see that these are the fills that are received in a live account, completely done by Prodigio on the same $5,000 per pair model, per leg model that is advocated in the newsletter. And remember, you can adjust this to whatever size you want. I've traded the pairs in the past with much, much bigger size. Depending on the liquidity of the stocks, it works just fine. You're still entering both at market. It's really not a question of slippage. It's really not difficult to do. But just to show you, notice that the PGN PNW pair, which again, this was done fully automated, it did it for me. Tom Cook is actually handling this, running the Prodigio on the side on another computer, and you can see the pair's up $2 already on very, very small size, long PNW, short PGN. All right, so that's just an example of it. This trade already went off today, and obviously that came from right here. All right, so how did a user get the PGN PNW into their computer in order to be able to turn it on in Prodigio and have it be done fully automated. Okay, so all you have to do is bring these strategies into your desktop by right-clicking. Go save this link. And I've already got a folder set up here on my desktop called Prodigio Strategies, and just hit save. And what's going to happen is there's going to be like a sort of a Word document text file, I guess for lack of a better word, that's going to go onto your desktop. And then just grab all of these. Let's go save link as. Let's grab this by as well. And these are two coal stocks right here, ACI, JRCC. I'm going to grab those as well. I'm going to actually grab all of these whiz files. And we're going to put a couple of them into our Prodigio. I'll take the BXP Vino as well. And that was what BXP Vino buy, and I need the BXP Vino sell. All right, and I'm not going to take the PGN PNW because it's already been done, right? The trade has already happened, okay? All right, so knowing that, I now have those saved inside of in my desktop in the Prodigio Strategies file. Now the question is, how do we get them into here? This is the Prodigio platform that you all should have open. How do we get them in? Well, very simply, remember that all of these strategies that we talk about, before they fire and actually become active strategies that are deployed inside of your Prodigio, okay, they have to start as strategies that are built using all sorts of nodes that are called rules, and they have to start in the section of Prodigio called Wizard Lab. So you can either build the strategies from scratch in Wizard Lab, or in the example that we're about to go through today, we're going to just bring the strategies in and just tweak them slightly, set them up. We're going to bring the strategies in straight from our desktop. We already cut and pasted them straight from our newsletter, right? And we're just going to import them into Prodigio and set them up, okay? All right, so let's do that. Let's go with the FCX SCCO long. All right. Now, the first thing also that I do want to mention, and we should take this down, I'm not going to go back to the newsletter. I'm going to leave the screen on Prodigio. But all of you right now, if you can, go back to where I showed you in My Trade. Click on the People tab. Go into that newsletter, okay? And I want you to scroll down to the section where it says Pending Trades. And I'll give you a moment to do that. Again, I'm just not going to do this because I don't want to scroll on the screen because there's a little bit too much bandwidth pushing through, and I don't want to break up my voice, all right? If you're in that section, I want you to write down these little notes, all right, so we can go through the charts and you can see exactly why the pairs are buys and sells at certain areas. Notice that in the pending trades you should see FCX SCCO long, and the entry point should be $5.43, and the stop should be $4, correct? And the target should say mean, and I'll explain that in a moment why the target just says mean, okay? So you've got that, write that down. 543 entry, stop $4, target mean. Next, ACI JRCC, okay? It's a short, so your trigger point is 898 on the pair, meaning that's the spread value between these two coal stocks, ACI minus JRCC, when it's at $8.98 is a short, and the stop is at $10.50, and once again our target is to the mean. Okay, so be writing this down or just have it open on a separate screen in the My Trade where you have the newsletter open. Thirdly, BXP minus Vino long. That's a long entry. $17.38 is the spread to enter. The stop is at $16 and the target is to the mean. Okay? You've got those numbers written down. And the reason I wanted you to write down those numbers is very simply, I don't want you to just do this stuff blindly on Prodigio without having a deeper understanding of why the pairs work, what is the sort of thinking behind the entries, behind the stops, behind the exits, etc. Because once you have even just a basic understanding of what I'm going to explain, and then as I go through and I show you how you build it in Wizard Lab and just bring the strategies in and change them one by one, right, to the symbols you want or the entries you want, you'll be able to create your own pair strategy on any stocks you want much easier. All right, you'll be able to do that yourself. Once we finish with this hour's show, it's going to be very obvious to you how you do all of that yourself, okay? So that being said, if I go back to my TOS platform and I click on charts, what we're going to do is we're going to take a brief look at these three pairs and see why they are entries and exits at those areas. So FCX SCCO, it's a long at 543 and a stop at $4. Okay, so you can see here, if I leave the horizontal tool line on, okay, look at the support level here in the pair. And there's 551. I can't get it just exact. Let's just say 551. Do you see how that's clearly a support level in the pair? And this is the reason why what we do with Prodigio is we essentially set it and forget it. That's the beauty of this piece of software, is that when you have a type of trading strategy that it requires patience, where you need the entry to be precise and you need it to be, and perhaps that entry might not happen for 2 to 3 days forward, right? Knowing that you can fully automate a entry, stop, and target, right? Prodigio is really the best tool for this, for pairs trading. It's really phenomenal for this, right? So notice that anyway, the entry is at the 543, which is right here where it needs to be, right? Notice that the extremes on the distance from the mean are about $3.65. And right now you're at $9, right? So taking the spread down here, that's about 450. It's a little bit further. It would be a little bit extreme, but still you would know that you're at a horizontal support level. All right, this is one of the tricks that you can use in order to find the pairs of which ones you want to automate, is you essentially look at where the spread value is lying in difference from the mean, which is this 10-period moving average. This is very simple. It's just a simple 10 MA. Set it up accordingly, meaning look for areas where there's extremes, like we know, for instance, that here $3 above the mean, usually you get a retracement. So here you're at 780, right? So if you added $3 to the mean, maybe you have a short entry at 1080. It's horizontal support right here around high 10s, low 11s. So it makes sense, right? Okay, so now you understand why it's at 543 and why the stop's at $4. Let's just move to the next one, and then we'll go on directly to the Prodigio stuff. We'll get to the fun part. ACI minus JRCC, short, 898, stop 1050. Why? Okay, first of all, very strong pair, good correlation, 92% correlated, right? Short entry at $9. Look here, look at the resistance. And by the way, the resistance is always on the bodies. The shadows don't mean anything. And if you want to know more about that, you can go back to the Pairs archive. There's tons of videos talking about this, and also the Pairs Trader newsletter. Pairs Trader newsletter user's guide explains this in detail. Okay, so body resistance 880 to 890. Notice that the short's at 898. Stop is at 1050, which is nothing more than a protective stop, right? And your target would be to the mean for a retracement back to the 10 MA. And notice also that that 898, which is what, $9. We're currently at 775 on the spread, on the mean value. That would be $1.25, right? $1.23 exactly over the mean. And look over here. Look at the extremes of the distance from the mean. It touches here in 1, 2, 3 places at a high of $1.42 there, $1.26 here, $1.63 here. So for me to add $1.25 or $1.23 onto the spread value where it is now to look for a short there makes a lot of sense. And again, looking for just a retracement back to the mean. Does everybody follow that? It's relatively easy to find these trades. And once you find them, you just want to, essentially look for areas where the distance from the mean gets a little bit extreme and you're looking for a convergence back to the mean. But because this is relatively hard to do with 2 stocks at the same time, by setting alerts and then quickly, I got to load up the 2 stocks, and then you've got to calculate your size, right? That's a whole other part of this that makes it difficult, right? Because you've got to calculate your size, set the right areas. Because you're rounding down to ones, you often have a odd size. It's all odd lots, right? Like if you look at the look at the PGN PNW. Because we wanted to be neutral on the cash, we traded 92 shares here, 108 shares there. Right, so you'd have to do all these calculations yourself, and that's going to be problematic. All right, so Prodigio does all that for you. Okay, so one last one. Let's look at the BXP Vino Long, and then we'll bring in some of these strategies right straight from the website. BXP Vino Long is 1738 with stop at 16. And again, this is essentially a pair that has a little bit like a upward bias to it. And so what I think Tom is looking for here is just a pullback into the area. And notice that even when the stock is trending, or the pair I should say is trending a little bit, you still do not have a deterioration of correlation. There's some points where the pairs become sort of a little bit out of whack, where the move up becomes a little bit strong, but again, the correlation always steps right back into line. So you've got correlation over 88% right now. All right, so this is essentially a pullback to the 1738 area with a protective stop at $16, and again, we're looking for a target of the simple 10 MA, which is the mean. All right. Does anybody have any questions just on these basics before we get into the automation? Anyone? If there's any newbies that have, anything just on these basics, we can go over it. Like I said, before we get into how the strategies are deployed on the automated system. No? Okay. All right, so let's move over to the automated part of the all right, let me go. Hold on. Now some stuff's coming in. Might be a little bit of a lag. All right. DRF says I'm missing something. Is the mean is the 10 period MA? That is correct. That is correct. The mean is always just measured by a simple moving average of 10 periods. And this is, I don't want to get too deep into this because I don't want it all to be just about the intricacies of pairs trading, because there's a lot of resources out there for you guys on these subjects at shadowtrader.net. It's really simple to find all that in the user's guide PDF. All these questions are answered there. But basically, the short answer is that over time and experience, I found that this 10 MA is very, very reliable. What I did is I experimented with different moving averages, different periods, whether it should be exponential or simple. I've even experimented with some indicators such as Bollingers and whatnot. I generally don't use those. I know that some pairs traders use the Bollinger. For me, what worked the best for me was just keeping it simple and using that 10 period moving average as the mean, and using that as my starting point to see whether or not the spread value was expanding or contracting away from that mean, and then using that distance from the mean indicator to tell me how near or how far, essentially, right? How far that expansion was. And just to be clear, those of you that have not yet used the distance from the mean, the reason that there are two lines here, one being pink and one being red, is because what we're tracking is the open and the close. All right, it's the open and the close. So the close is the pink and the open is the red. So I pay much more attention to the pink, basically. I mean, I like to know where the pair opened, which is cool, but essentially, you can see here, it's very obvious that the red is the open and the pink is the close, because you see how this body was very large. So you've got this low open where you spike down, almost $4 away from the mean, and then you move up to here, right? So when you're measuring your distance from the mean, you want to be measuring the pink lines at all times. And wherever there's extremes of the pink, like here, say 250 above, you can see BXP Vino has a very, very difficult time getting over $2.50 away from the mean. Correct? Because look at, historically, we're going all the way back to middle of June, and it's never happened. And yet, looking at the chart where I've left the crosshairs, you have 3 touches of exactly that area, and a lot of touches where you went lower than that area, and the spread immediately collapsed. So why this is, I don't know. We don't really need to know that. You just have to understand that there's a limit to how much relative strength BXP can have versus Vino, and it always comes back. And there's also a limit to how much relative weakness Vino can have in relation to BXP. These are two real estate investment trusts, so these are generally good pairs to trade because the stocks in the sector generally move together with each other, and you don't get a lot of dispersion where there's outliers where one stock will be super duper strong and the rest of the group will be weak. They generally tend to trade in line with each other. So that's just a hint there, because somebody was asking, how do you pick the trades, etc. Your starting point would obviously be using sectors. Start with a sector. Let's say it's semiconductors. A lot of the stocks in the sector. Let's say it's KLAC, LLTC, MCHP, BRCM, right? So you know who some of these players are in the chip makers. Start just matching them up against each other using this chart and see what the correlation is like, see what the the distance from the mean is like, etc., right? All right. Somebody's asking, where is the user's guide with the indicator code? That's at shadowtrader.net, or in My Trade, click on the pairs trader and find the PDF link is right in there. That'll take you to the user's guide. The code for the distance from the mean is right inside there. Okay, code for the distance from the mean is in there, so you can put on all this stuff. This is just a simple RSI, which is straight from Thinkorswim. It's not it's not an indicator that we wrote. However, it is customized to be on 2 periods only. So it's a very fast RSI. Your typical RSI is measured over 14 periods. This is measured over 2 periods. Due to the typical nature of the pairs of being very squirrely back and forth, I found that a fast RSI seems to work with them. I use it as confirmation, basically. I start with the distance from the mean as the be-all, end-all, but I do use the fast RSI as correlation, and you can see that in areas where the distance from the mean became extreme, the RSI touched the 95 upper threshold. I have a 95.5 threshold set and immediately collapsed. Same thing here. You had lower distance from the mean, and yet your RSI touching. So you can just use these as, as basically as extra guidance, right? And I'm going to actually, I have Mike Coyle next to me who does a lot of work on Prodigio. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, we're not going to do this in this show, but you could easily set a Prodigio strategy that would trade off the RSI 2. Very simple, right? And just have if I set nodes and say if RSI 2 period greater than 95, enter the pair short, RSI, so there you go. So there's just, you could either set up a Prodigio strategy just for that, or we could set up a Prodigio strategy that just adds that into this particular strategy. So for instance, I know that I have to have distance from the mean, say $2.50 or greater, and at the same time, I don't want to trade unless the RSI at the same time is say 93 or above, or whatever the case. So that would be pretty cool, So we're not going to be building that in this particular show, but just something to keep in mind as we get into the automation, so you have an idea of how far this can go. I mean, the combinations, for lack of a better word, of what you can do in Prodigio are almost endless. I mean, literally, if you take every technical indicator that's in there and you put it all together, I mean, it's literally almost endless.
Yeah, one of the upcoming shows, I'll ask Brian to do.
Yeah, that'd be good. Exactly. Mike is saying in an upcoming show, perhaps we ask Brian to maybe tweak some of the pair strategies, and we'll add in a Bollinger, we'll add in an RSI2, etc., etc. All right, cool. So that being said, let's go back into Prodigio now, and let's take a look at how we can get these strategies automated. We already know that we want to create a strategy for FCX SCCO, and we want to create one for ACI JRCC, and then we're going to do a custom one together where we bring in, where we find a pair, maybe we do the BXP Vino or whatever, and we build our own strategy. All right, so the first thing you have to do is, when you're looking at your Prodigio platform, you need to make sure that you're on the Wizard Lab tab. We're essentially going to be dealing today with 2 sections of Prodigio. One is going to be Wizard Lab, and one is going to be called RTS Strategies. You can think of it this way, is that Wizard Lab is the laboratory where they are built, and then RTS Strategies is sort of like the main stage where they go play, and you just kind of turn out where we deploy, exactly, where we deploy them, and then they run on your platform in real time during the course of the trading day. So starting in Wizard Lab, we know that we already have strategies sitting in our folder called Prodigio Strategies that we imported from the newsletter. So very simply, we're just going to click Import, and we're going to go over to Desktop. Let me see if I can find this here. Let me see here. Desktop, there we go. Okay, and inside Desktop, as I told you, we put them into Prodigio Strategies here. So you want to double-click that area. And notice that all of the 6 strategies that we imported from the newsletter are already there. Okay, so we want to bring in the ACI JRCC buy, and we want to open that. And notice that Prodigio gives us a confirmation box essentially just saying imported the strategy, named this from the file strategy pairs ACI buy.wiz. All these files are called .wiz. All right, hit OK. Now we need to import again, and let's bring in the sell side. And you'll see in a moment when I go through the rule builder and the strategy builder, showing you why there's always 2 strategies for every for a pair strategy. When you're just looking for stocks like a needle in a haystack, you're running some sort of a strategy that's looking for whatever stocks that are over a certain moving average or something like that. You don't need to have 2 strategies, you just have one. But because this is a pair strategy, you need to have one strategy firing on one stock, and simultaneously we'll have this other strategy firing on the other stock. So this is essentially a trading style that encompasses two Prodigio strategies running at once. All right, so I'm just going to click open, and I'm going to open up that sell side, and once again I get the imported strategy import rule confirmation box, and I'm good to go. All right, so knowing that, I can now switch over to the RTS strategies, right? And I want to see that those have actually been imported. And if I scroll down, I can see very clearly that notice that the Wizard Lab strategies are broken up into two areas. All the longs are on the left, all the shorts are on the right. That means that any strategies that are deploying on the short side are going to show up here. Essentially, these are strategies that are initiated as a sell. Over here, we have any strategies that are initiated as a buy. Okay? So you guys follow so far. Now, Prodigio will not trade automated unless strategies are enabled and the RTS auto trading itself is enabled. Okay, so currently we have it disabled, right? So first thing would be that you need to enable it. Again, you get a essentially a warning confirmation saying if you click yes, you are permissioning automated trading through the close of 12:07, which is today, or until you disable manually. Reason that is for safety's sake, you need to turn your red button at the top on, right, every single day in order to have automated strategies running. And this is something that's just been set up inside of Prodigio as a safety valve, essentially, so that you would not have strategies, firing every day without some human element essentially turning it on. And I'm going to say yes, and I'm also going to point you to this area up here, is that notice that it's automatically set to expire at the end of today, but if I wanted to, I could actually set this out later. So let's say I was very confident, I'm very, very well versed in Prodigio, I don't have a problem with it turning itself on every single morning, right? I can just go up here and just set that time to much later. I can say, you know what, let these pair strategies run, until the end of the month, hit apply, and I'm good to go. Correct. That's correct. So Mike has just brought up a good point, is that everything I'm talking about here, as far as setting your trading expiration date and your auto trading enabled, this is only for new entries. And that's a really, really good point, because one of the questions that we always get with Prodigio is like, well, if I don't turn it back on, what about my targets and my stops, right? Which is a very, very good question. But Prodigio has thought of all that. All of that is hard-coded into the system. Your targets and your stops are always working, regardless of if you sleep late, you're sick, you don't go to work that day, you don't even turn on your computer blows up. It doesn't matter. Your targets and your stops are always working. So you're really just enabling for new entries. So what's happening is essentially, let's say we set up the FCX SCCO pair in Prodigio, and on the first day we don't get a fire, right? The pair just doesn't go there. The spread hasn't moved close to that $5.43 area. So the next day, once again, we've got to go back in here, turn on the green button, and we're good to go. Or, like I said, set the date and leave it on. Okay? All right. So moving on. We have now imported the strategies into Prodigio, and we're pretty much almost there. We have shown that once the strategies are imported, all we have to do is turn them on. We also have to make sure that they are both checked, correct? Because obviously they're not going to be turned on unless they're checked. So we've got one strategy that's going to fire a buy on here, and one strategy that's going to fire a sell. And our last step that we need to do, and this is very, very important, is we need to create the watch list, or the universe as I like to call it, that the trade is going to fire upon. Okay, notice that when you open up your Prodigio for the first time, everything is defaulting to a watch list of S&P 100. That means that, for instance, I could choose to run this strategy, which is called gap, fading a gap up on 3 higher lows. It's going to run and try to find this setup on all the stocks in the S&P 100 if I let it run, right? It's obviously not going to fire now because it's already 12:30 p.m. Eastern. It's a gap strategy, so it's coded to fire at the open. But it's going to fire on the S&P 100. In a pair strategy, the watch list is somewhat different. We're not interested in firing on the entire, universe of the S&P 100 or, all the stocks over $50 with big volume. We're interested in what? We're interested in just 2 stocks. So we need to set up watch lists for just the 2 stocks that we're interested in, okay? So what's going to happen is, notice that if we click on the S&P 100 here, right, you can see here that we need to create a watch list for just ACI and just JRCC. And one's going to be a buy and one's going to be a sell. So if we go back to Wizard Lab and we go over here into step 2, step 3, which is the backtesting section, in this section, this is where you're going to create the watch lists for the individual stocks. All right? So it's very, very simple to do, especially when you're creating a watch list of just one stock. It's real, real easy. You simply go here where it says symbols into this section. It defaults to market indices, and if you want to click through, you can just select some stuff here, right? But we're not going to do that. We're going to hit the gear button on the right side, and once you hit the gear, you're going to get the symbol list editor. And I want you to look at the left side there, and notice that I have a bunch of stuff that's like lists. You have my pivots, quick quotes, but notice that there's two individual stocks here. I already have watch lists set up for FCX SCCO, correct? And now so that's just an example of what I've already done to set up a watch list for individual stocks. So we know that we need to have a watch list that has ACI on it and a watch list that has JRCC on it. So very simply, click New, erase what's here, and we're going to call this one ACI is the name of it, and I hit the tab button or just click on symbol, and I've got to put the symbol into the list. Here's your list of symbols, and this one is just going to be only one symbol, which is ACI. And after I hit return and you go to the next line, you're good to go. And then just hit the save button, and then watch what happens in the left hand side. Notice that a symbol list, which is comprised of just one stock, has been added into the symbol list, and it's called ACI. And now I know I need one for JRCC, so let me go New again and go JRCC. I'll do this in caps. Click on symbol. And again, JRCC, which is my other coal stock. So everybody see how that's done, essentially? And again, I'm just going to hit save, and it's going to save it according to the name that you put up here. Very simple. And notice that in my left-hand side of symbol lists, right, the two stocks appear there. All right. Here's the question, and I'm very glad this was asked. So DRF said exactly what I was about to say, so I appreciate that. So DRF says, why does the location of the pair in a watch list have anything to do with why a strategy fires? Can I put the two symbols into the same list? For example, ACI and JRCC can be in the same list. No, you cannot. You cannot do that. Because remember that because this is a pair strategy, you need to have one strategy fire on just one stock. And you need to know the way you have your pair set up, which stock it is you want to buy and which one it is you want to sell. So for a moment, I'm going to switch back to toss, right? Before we turn the strategy on, I'm going to go back to the Thinkorswim window, and we're going to take one last look at ACI minus JRCC. Oops, not JRXX, JRCC. We know that we want to short it at 898, and we want to cover it at the mean. So we're looking to short, correct? So in this case, because this is the spread value between the two stocks, all right, listen to this closely. If you've never traded pairs, this is kind of like the pretty much once you understand this concept, you're 90% there. The direction that you want to go with the pair is always referencing the first symbol. Always. It does not mean that the first symbol is always long. If somebody says short the pair ACI JRCC, what they mean is that they're shorting the first symbol, buying the second symbol. If somebody says I'm going to buy that spread, then they're buying the first symbol and selling the second symbol. Okay, that's really important to know. So in this case, in our example from the newsletter, you notice that in the pending trades of the newsletter, the trade was to short the pair ACI JRCC at a spread value of 898 when it comes up into here, correct? At the resistant area. Therefore, you must short the stock ACI and buy the stock JRCC. All right, so we know that. So let's go back to Prodigio, and now all we have to do is set up the Prodigio platform in the RTS strategies for that. So, starting with the sell side, I'm going to uncheck that gap strategy. If this is the sell, what should this be set to? It's got to be set to ACI. And if this is the buy, what should this be set to? It's got to be set to JRCC. Voila. And that's it. Does anybody have any questions just on that specifically? Here we go. Now, you see, they asked the questions that I'm about to say, which is perfect. Like Gary guy says, how many shares you short and how many you go long? Good question. I'm getting to that in 1 second. There's one more step. There's one more very important step. All right. In pairs, there's a number of ways to do it, but the most common way to do it is always to be dollar neutral. So in the examples that we use in the newsletter, it's always $5,000 of one stock, $5,000 of the other stock. Okay, so how do you do that so it sets the size for you automatically? Very simply, click the button in the top of Prodigio that says Settings. And here is where you set your Prodigio to fire on the $5,000 per trade, or a fixed share size per trade, fixed dollar of buying power deployed, which is what we're going to do, or some percentage of buying power deployed. Okay? So knowing that we want to be what's called dollar weighted and dollar neutral, what we're going to do is we're going to use a fixed dollar of buying power, and we're going to change that number to 5,000. Okay? So you want to switch your fixed dollar to 5,000. And here where it says share rounding precision, we want to round down to ones. We don't want to go tens or hundreds. We want to go all the way down to ones, because we want to have it very precise. We want to know that if, $5,000 divided by the value of the stock comes out to 137 shares, we want 137 shares. We want to be as equal as possible. Okay? Now, one thing that you have to keep in mind, all right, is Prodigio has a lot of safety measures built into it, which are really awesome, okay, which essentially allow you to robotic trade. And let's say something goes completely out of whack, you have one stock just gapping out of control, and there's nothing you can do about it. You don't want the automated system to just let it keep running and turn into a big loss. So what Prodigio has done is built in a number of fail safes here, such as account drawdown, position drawdown, etc. Now for pairs trading, you must understand you have to have the position drawdown turned off, because if the position drawdown is enabled, once you lose more than 1.25% in any one position, which in the pairs trade is half the trade, it's going to take you out of the trade, and you don't want to do that. Because remember, in a pairs trade, all that matters is the net P&L, not the P&L of one stock. So you very easily, in pairs, could be down 3% in one of your stocks, but you're going to be up, say, 3.2% in the stock you're up. You don't want Prodigio to close out the trade on you and get you out of it, right, if one of your positions is down 1.25, because remember, the position drawdown measures by position, and a pairs trade is 2 positions. Okay, it's 2 positions. The entire pairs trade, we look at it as one trade. We are short a spread of ACI minus JRCC, but in reality, what is going on in your Prodigio platform, you've got 2 trades on. You've got a short trade on ACI and a long trade on JRCC. All right, so we want to have our position drawdown disabled. Uncheck that, right? Leave all this other stuff the same. We want to have a fixed dollar here at the 5,000. These max number of trades positions we can leave alone. That's 10, max number of shares per trade. You can bump it up. It depends on your size, but we should be fine because these stocks are not that expensive, but at the same time, we're only putting 5,000 on each side. If you're going, obviously, with much bigger dollar buying power deployed, then you'd want to move this max up, right? Max number of trades per symbol, I believe that's per day, right? Max number of trades per symbol is an enablement like per day. That should be fine, because with pairs, in the style that we teach, you're really trading in more of a swing manner. You're going, in on a Monday, out on a Thursday. However, if you wanted to create a pair strategy that was extremely active and was looking for very small movements off the mean and batting it back and forth, then obviously you would take your max number of trades per symbol and you'd bump it up to, say, I don't know, 15 or 20 or whatever, etc. Min-max trade price, we're going to disable that because it doesn't matter, and so we're going to leave everything as it is. So again, we're disabling position drawdown, and we're hitting apply, right? We should be good to go on that. And we're going to hit OK to clear it. And that's pretty much it. So now we have a pair strategy running, waiting for the ACI minus JRCC spread to get up to 898. All right? Gary Guy says, does trading pairs keep me from simultaneously trading other strategies with different risk settings? Yeah, unfortunately, Gary, right now you can't change the risk settings per strategy, but that is coming in the future. We're well aware of that. That it's a possibly a limitation, and we are definitely coming up with that in a later build to allow you to adjust your risk settings per strategy.
Be part of Wizard Lab in the strategy section.
Oh, cool, cool. So Mike is telling me it's actually going to be right in Wizard Lab in the strategy section. Good, good, good. So you're actually going to be whatever. Okay, very good. Very good. Very good. Okay, let's move on to example number 2. Let's just bring in the FCX SCCO, and then we're going to take a look at setting up the BXP Vino long so we can get closer into how the strategies actually look when we're looking at them. Okay, let's just take a look there. Let's go into, let's just do this one relatively quickly for time's sake. Let's go back into Wizard Lab. And let's go into Strategy Builder, and let's import the FCX SCCO. And before we do that, let's just import it. And let's go into Desktop, just so we can run through so you guys know exactly how that's done again. Let's go to Prodigio Strategies, and let's bring in the FCX SCCO. Let's open that, and let's import again. And I'm going to bring in the FCX SCCO cell, just to walk through this with you guys so you have another example of how it's done. We've already brought in the ACI JRCC. Now we're going to bring in the FCX SCCO. So I've imported them through Wizard Lab. I've opened up strategies and notice that those two are now at the bottom of my list as well. And in this case, because remember, this is a long one, right? So if I'm buying the spread, right, it's a buy on the first symbol and a short on the second symbol. So it's essentially the opposite of what I did with the ACI JRCC, right? Now, if you recall from earlier, I already have these stocks in the watch list. Remember? You saw the FCX SCCO there. So again, let's start with the sell side just for fun because we did last time, right? So I'm buying the spread. So if I'm buying FCX and I'm selling SCCO, then what has to be in here? This has to be SCCO, and I just select it, click it, and select it. And then the same thing on the buy side over here on the strategy. I turn on my strategy, and because I'm buying the spread, I'm buying the first symbol, so I'm going to let this strategy run long on FCX. There you go. And that's it. You're good to go. So now you already have 2 trades running, and if you so choose to, right, remember, you could literally extend this, as I've done, out to the end of the month, and you don't even need to touch it. And with pairs, it's relatively safe. I'd say it's more than relatively safe because remember, you're never going to get those big outsized moves in either direction because you are trading delta neutral, right? You have long exposure and short exposure at the same time on 2 stocks that are highly correlated, that are 99% of the time in the same sector. So just think about that for a second, right? You've got one coal stock short, one coal stock long. In this case, FCX, SCCO, you've got copper stocks, right? Copper and mining, one long, one short. It's going to be very, very difficult for one copper stock to rally 3-4 points, you know, and the other one to fall 3-4 points. They're generally going to move in sync. But when the pairs move in sync, they don't move perfectly in sync, and that bit of imperfection is what we exploit with this strategy, is that over time, one will get, if you can imagine that they both race, and technically they should always be equal with each other, more than likely, but every now and then, you know, one gets ahead of the other, but he can never get too far ahead of the other because just of the nature of the game, right? There's money flow into the sector, money comes out of the stronger ones into the weaker ones, whatever, and they're in the same sector anyway, so they all tend to flatten out regardless, all right? So that's essentially it. All right, so we've now brought in our strategies, and now what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at building our own. But we're not going to build from scratch. We're going to just use the building blocks that we already have in RTS strategies in order to build on the BXP Vino long. That's what we'll do, is we'll use the BXP Vino, for instance. And I'm just going to bring up the toss for one last time so we get an idea of what we're trying to do. Let's go BXP minus Vino. And let's just say that we're bullish on this pair, which we should be because the spread value is basically slowly increasing. And again, if you took notes from your Pairs Trader newsletter, right, available at MyTrade, you would have noticed that your long entry should be at $17.38 and your stop should be at $16. All right, so just remember that, $17.38 and $16. All right, and I'm going to bring back up Prodigio, and let's go into Wizard Lab, and let's open up some. Let's go into Rule Builder here, because what we need to do is build new rules, and we're essentially going to build 3 rules for BXP and Vino. We're going to build a rule for entry, we're going to build a rule for target, and we're going to build a rule for the stop. All right, so we know that the entry has to be at 1738, the stop has to be at 16, and our target has to be to the mean. All right, so knowing that, we can find rules here in our rule builder that we already have. We're going to use the rules from, say, let's just use ACI GRCC as the entry, right? We're going to open it up. Now, pay no attention to these ones here. This is just duplicating a little bit because I've got my username that I'm doing the show in, and then remember, Tom Cook, who does the Pairs Hour, he has access to one of these accounts, so together some of these things are duplicated. So in yours, you probably will not see the little ones, okay? But if you do, don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. All right, so you're going to open up ACI GRCC. All right, here is the guts of the strategy. All right, and remember, you don't need to know all of this in order to do this, but I'm just going to show you really briefly what it all means, and then I'm going to show you how we're going to change all of this into BXP Vino. Real simple. All right, so what is Prodigio doing behind the scenes? Every 1 minute, it's looking at the OHLC close value of ACI and GRCC. It is subtracting GRCC from ACI, and it is comparing that to a constant, which is our short area. Remember, we wanted to short the pair at 898, and it's asking every 1 minute, is it greater than or equal to 898? And it needs to also ask, is the time after 9:35 and 30 seconds? And this is really just an extra sort of mechanism that we added in. You know, once we started getting more familiarized with the automated strategies of pairs, we started to realize that it was much safer to have the pair fire, you know, 4 or 5 minutes after the open, because a lot of times what will happen is you'll have the spread value will be very strange, because one stock will start to print right at 9:30. But as you know, not all stocks open right at 9:30. The specialist at the post might be sleeping. He might have got drunk the night before. He comes in late. He's really groggy. He doesn't open up this. He doesn't open the stock. Maybe he's got a lot of orders on the books. Maybe the stock is gapping that morning. He needs to get himself together. He's got to open it up. And you see the first print on the stock comes in at 9:30 and 30 seconds. So it's really important not to fire a pair strategy like right on right on the open. So what we do is we essentially put in a time adapter there to say, is the time greater than 9:35? And if so, yes. And what's another thing to note about this is that what you're really doing here with the time adapter is you're looking for a print on the stock. So you're basically Prodigio is basically asking, is the print of the 1 minute OHLC on ACI, is that print coming in on the time and sales greater than 9:35 today? Or on GRCC, is that print today, time of day, greater than 9:35? And again, if both of those are greater than, hook it together with an AND operator, right? If all of this is true, output your signal. Very simply, right? So output your signal. So knowing that these are the guts of what a ACI GRCC entry short at 898 is, do you see very easily how you can change this rule to BXP Vino? You should. It's really easy. Watch. All I have to do is just go BXP, second symbol VNO, right? And I know I've got and here I want to change my OHLCs here to BXP VNO, right? My time stays the same. What's my constant for the entry in the trade? 1738, right? Right? DRF, I'll get to the forming bar in a second at the end. My constant is I want to get long at 1738, right? But does anybody notice what is wrong with the strategy? There's one thing missing here. Does anybody see that? I can't save this right now as the entry. Something else needs to be changed. Remember, I want to get in if the spread is either 1738 or below 1738. So those of you that are a little more advanced in this or have been paying attention, something should jump out at you right now and know that there's one more minor change I need to make in the strategy on top of just changing the symbols and my constant. Anyone? I know there's a little bit of a delay, but yeah, there's a little bit of a delay, so we'll see if anybody can get it. What is the last thing that needs to be done here in the strategy in order to get us long on BXP Vino? There you go, Bob D. See, that shouldn't even count, Bob D, because you're the winner of the contest. But that's good. That's good. Exactly. See this greater than or equal to node? It's got to be less than, obviously, right? So that's in logical operators, right? And I just go like this and click it here, and it erases it. And I can just take less than or equal to and drag it out, and that's it. And bring my outputs in. See that there? And that output goes right into here, and that's it. Exactly. So you guys all know your stuff. You guys are good. So that change has to be less than or equal to, and now we're good to go. And I want to go save as, and this rule is going to be called BXP Vino entry. That's it, BXP Vino entry. And I want to save it, right? And because my strategy automatically is set up to be less than or equal to here, do you realize that I can now create the rule for the stop, right? Using the same thing by just changing the constant. If we're less than or equal to $16, I want to signal the fire. That's my stop right there, real simple. Save as, BXP Vino, stop, done. So now I've created a rule for the BXP Vino stop. I need one more rule. The rule is for the target, right? Now the target is going to go directly to the mean, fully automated. Prodigio on every 1 minute basis will identify what the simple 10-period moving average on the daily is. No muss, no fuss. You don't need to do any of the work yourself. Let's just open that rule up. Let's go to open, and let's open the FCX SCCO target. Use that one as our example. Boom. Okay, so look, what's happening here very simply. Take the closing value of the 1 minute OHLC, one minus the other. Is it greater than or equal to, look, daily minus 10-period moving average? Done. Time adapter, same thing. Don't want the target to fire right at the open. Want the time to be after 9:35 a.m. Very simple. If all these are true, you get a signal. Somebody was asking earlier, what is the forming bar? Forming bar allows you to slice time even smaller than 1 minute. We can go as low as 5 seconds. We have found from experience for the pairs, it works great on just the 1 minute. We get better signals just on the 1 minute, so we stay on the 1 minute. But if you wanted to have forming bar on, you could slice time less than 1 minute, okay? But for this example, and this is actually also how all this stuff works right in the newsletter. You can see that I took this code straight out of the newsletter. We're sticking with the 1 minute, okay? So you've got that all set, right? Only thing you need to do on this one here is you need to change your symbols, right? Because this is a target for FCX SCCO, right? So in this case, we're going with BXP, and we want to go VNO, and again, BXP, and VNO. Oops, that's VX, so Vino. And again, down here in our time adapter, we want to go BXP. And down here, we want to go VNO. And now we've got our target set, right? And again, let's just save as, and let's call that the BXP VNO target. All right, guys, we're almost ready to automate this thing. We've got all the rules necessary to create the strategy. Very simple. Go into step 2. And this is really cool how this is set up in Prodigio. Do you guys notice that everything I'm doing in Prodigio is really sequential, which is really cool? Like, start with the rule builder, build the rules. Rules become strategies. Step 2. Strategies can be back tested in step 3. What do you want to back test them on? Select a universe, select a watch list, create your own watch list. I mean, the possibilities are endless. Step 4, bam! Deploy, trade. I mean, it's really simple, right? All right, so anyway, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Step 2, strategy builder, right? All strategies are made up of rules. In the case of the pairs, what is the rules? One entry, one target, one stop. It's kind of like one bourbon, one scotch, and one beer. In this case, one vino, right? One BXP, one vino, right? So bring them in. Scanning rule, right? Scanning rules are over here in scanning, and management rules are down here, meaning exits and targets, like stop outs or targets, are down here in management, right? Scanning rules are up here. So what scanning rule do we got to bring in? Well, BXP vino entry, right? Done. Notice that it automatically sets this to buy. Good to go. And I already have it set to market, right? So it's just going to buy at market because that's all we want to do. Let's manage the trade. Well, we got to bring in the target and the stop. That's all going to go down here. We're going to leave the add to position blank because this is a simple sort of one-step strategy. We're not adding to our position. But if you wanted to get more complex, you could easily build rules that add to your position. For instance, I don't know, let's take an example. You are doing a RSI strategy, buying on weakness. When that RSI comes down to an oversold, to a low level, you can be adding on to your position. There's a number of things you can do. You could do this with pairs. You could easily set up new rules for the pair strategy that as the pair moves further and further away from the mean, add to the position, right? Keep adding on to the pair's position and then bringing it in as you come in, right? All right, but that being said, let's get our closing strategies in. Let's go BXP Vino stop, and we know we need a target as well. Done. Just bring them in right there. Notice that whatever direction you're going up here, Prodigio will automatically reverse your direction down here. See how this is buy? And watch this. If I move this to sell, let's say I wanted to sell the spread, these automatically change to buy. Right. And they stay grayed out, which is cool. So, you're really controlling it here with the buy side. You don't have to really do anything. All right? So that's that. That's done, right? So knowing that this is the buy side of the strategy, let's go save as. And I always do mine the same. I always go strategy, pairs like this. I believe I want to use the same, make sure I do this the same way. There you go, strategy like that. I like to use the same protocol for all of them. Pairs, and then I call this BXP VNO, and I'm going to call it the buy side in parentheses. You guys can see on the left hand side that I do all my strategies the same when they're pairs. I go strategy, gap higher, what it is, strategy pairs, done. All right, save it. Now obviously we need a sell. How simple is that? One click, change the scanning rule to sell, and hit save as. Change that to sell. Done. And that's it. And we've just built the strategy. Last step, deploy, automate. Also, don't forget we need to build our watch list for the two pairs, but we already know that's real easy. We just go into backtest. We click the market indices here. We click the little gear next to the market indices. We click on new. And let's set up BXP. Let's put BXP in here, right? And we're good to go. And let's hit save. And let's create another watch list. Let's hit new again. And let's create another watch list for VNO. And let's hit save again. And notice that they appear in my symbol list editor. Let's close that. And let's deploy strategy. That takes us to RTS strategies. And look, everything's already set up there. Now we know it's a buy. And just for continuity's sake, I've been starting with the sell side, right? I know I'm selling VNO. Turn it on. Turn my strategy on to VNO. It's not capitalized, but that's fine. Turn on my strategy over here and turn it on to BXP. There's BXP. And that's it. So now, notice that in just a couple of minutes, and obviously I've been walking slowly through this chat to show it to you, but you notice that the actual work that I've done on each pair in terms of setting it up as a Prodigio strategy has taken literally minutes because I'm taking the strategies directly from the newsletter, which is doing 90% of the work for you in terms of finding the pairs, telling you what the entries are, telling you what the exits are. This is a very simple, profitable strategy that works over time. You can go back over the Pairs Trader newsletter from 2009, and you can see that this advisory has never gone negative, that it's always been positive, and these are just trades that we do as examples live to show you how to do it. But look at what Bob D did. Bob D, knowing that there's a contest on, traded extremely aggressively over the course of a month and went in and out of the same pair 4 times. okay, and made 2.4% in 1 month. He cleared $241 on the $10,000 unmargined. Right, so that's nothing to sneeze at, especially when you're not taking on a lot of risk. You know, a lot of people can say, oh yeah, you know, well, I got this strategy, it does 29% a year, right? Yeah, but in bad times, that strategy, if that strategy draws down 34% or whatever, it's not a good strategy. You know, when the dispersion between the returns is that big, it's, you know, it's not very good. But with pairs, you know, again, it's very difficult to have these very, very large drawdowns or outsized losses because of the nature of the push-pull effect of the two stocks. It's just not going to happen. You're not going to have a pair just collapse multiple dollars, you know, on any given day, unless, of course, obviously there's market risk, there's gap risk. I mean, that can happen with any type of stock, you know. So like MH says, you know, less painful sleepless nights. Exactly. There's really no sleepless nights with this strategy. Now, granted, depending on how much money you're deploying, if you're, you know, let's say you're just starting out and you're using the model portfolio size that we use, okay? Obviously, the returns are going to be somewhat smaller than if you were just trading single stocks or single options, right? But at the same time, you're taking out an immense amount of the risk. And remember, the sizing is totally up to you. I mean, I have in the past traded with about between 50 and 100,000 per side. So just think about that for a second, all right? And I'm making percentage-wise the same thing, but obviously I've got a lot more shares on. You know, I'm sitting with, you know, 1,700 shares on one side and 1,400 shares on the other, and then when that spread moves, you know, 50 cents in 3 days, it becomes a little bit more worth your while. But it's all just a question of size, you know? And if the stocks are liquid, as I've been saying, the size, you know, the size shouldn't matter. You know as well as I do that you can fire a market order at IBM or some of these mining stocks or some of these semiconductor stocks, like if you're doing a LLTC minus Broadcom or whatever. I mean, you can throw 2,000 shares at it. There's not major slippage there. I mean, there's nothing. I mean, it's so thick. There's so much on the bid and so much on the offer. You're not really going to get hurt, you know. So that's essentially it, you know. Roadrunner says, during market hours, it would be better practice to select the watch list first before checking the strategy on because it could possibly fire on an unwanted position. That's a very, very good point. That's a very, very good point. Because remember, if I turn this on automatically, it fires on what's in that drop-down box. So that's actually a very good point that Roadrunner is making. So you want to change this first. That's a very, very good point. Change your strategy, drop down this first, then hit the checkbox, because if this button is green, right, and it's not before the end of the day, etc., right, we're here, and the button is green, you are live. You're going live right there. Exactly. That's good. All right, I'm going to wrap it up here. I'm just going to answer one last question. I'm going to answer one last question, and that's going to be for Isosceles. Isosceles says, did Bob override Prodigio Auto at any time? Isosceles, I can tell you the honest truth, he did not. As through the Prodigio admin behind the scenes, we don't have personal information such as account numbers or anything like that, but we have the usernames, right? We just have the person's username, and according to Bob's username, I found all his trades, was able to pull up and see what the trades actually were, and all of the trades were fully automated, and it was all Prodigio. So there's the answer to your question. He did not override. It was all because had he not executed the trades on Prodigio, I would not have, you know, I would not have seen it. Exactly. See, and Bob just said no, I did not. So there you go. So, you know, because I only see, you know, what was done on Prodigio, and I can assure you that all the trades were there on Prodigio. So that's basically it. All right. DRF setting the pairs alerts on toss. That's more of a pairs trading question. Again, if anybody has questions like DRF, questions that are specific to just the pairs trading, I urge you to check out the user's guide at MyTrade inside of the Pairs Trader newsletter. Very, very easy to find. Right. It's right in. Pairs Trader Users Guide has all of the answers for you, as well as Thursday afternoons, 4:15 p.m. Eastern, 3:15 Central. Tom, the Southern Gentleman Cook, doing the Pairs Hour, which will answer a lot of these questions. And also, if you want to have a refresher on how to do this all with Prodigio, I should tell you that Tom does 90% Prodigio in the show. The Thursday afternoon pairs show are mostly about Prodigio. It's mostly all automated talk. He has Prodigio up the whole time. So
You know, some other
enjoy. Yeah.
there was someone asked, does the execution get done on Prodigio or is it at toss? So you can tell.
Oh, yeah. So Mike is saying that he saw that somebody asking, does the execution happen on Prodigio or on toss? It's happening in your Thinkorswim account, which is linked to your Prodigio, and it's completely synced. It's 100% synced up, and it's identical. And when you fire on Prodigio, you'll be able to go into your what is it? The monitor tab. And as a matter of fact, like, that's a good question, because you'll notice right here in toss, right in the main. Look at this is my toss. This is not my Prodigio window. Look at the monitor tab, right? The trade happens. The trade happens right there at toss. And by the way, notice that this trade happened earlier today, and I told you before it was up $2. Remember? Well, look, it's already up $11 now. So this is an actual live pairs trade with real money that was put on today, fully automated by Prodigio. Happened this morning while I was doing something completely different. I didn't even touch it. It was all just, happened right there. So it's cool. All right. So anyway, on behalf of myself and the entire Shadow Trader and Prodigio team here in beautiful Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, I wish you guys good trading, good afternoon, and catch you guys on the next broadcast. Again, listen to Tom on Thursdays for the Prodigio pairs, for the pairs trading hour on Thursdays with Tom Cook. All right. See you guys then. See ya.